Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a great show today. With me from our nation's capital and from Joby Aviation, Greg Bowles. How's it going?
Hey, good morning. It's great to have a chance to talk to you, Dan.
Yeah, glad you're here. I'm very curious about how you got into all this. But before we get into that, let's talk about your background a little bit. Where'd you grow up?
So I grew up on the East Coast of the United States. I ended up. My mother was a flight attendant for United Airlines. My grandfather was a recreational pilot, like a general aviation pilot in a Piper Cub. And kind of in my formative years, I moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And I think the stain in my heart, I'm a Browns fan. I dragged that with me my whole life. So that's a weight that I drag around. And maybe this is the year, or maybe next year's the year. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that weight's getting any lighter right now. But, TBD, I guess. So some kind of background, I guess a familial background in aviation, but that wasn't your job for most of your life. I mean, you're not native to the aviation world, right? What have you done?
Yeah.
What else have you done?
Well, so when I was going through high school, I since being a little kid, always enthralled by aviation and looking to the sky, the kind of person that when you hear an aircraft, not complaining, but looking, like, what is it? And losing the attention of the people I'm talking to. And so I earned a lot of money mowing lawns when I was a kid, 10, 11 years old, mowing all those lawns around Cleveland. And I started to take that money and took flying lessons at a local airport when I was like in my early high school days. Kind of one of those weird kids. I was playing football, I was like wrestling, and I was flying, learning to fly. And so ended up becoming a young pilot, got an aerospace engineering degree at Embry-Riddle. Eventually, my first job was at Cessna Aircraft Company, designing business jets, doing advanced design on business jets. And kind of grew in my piloting career through that path. I had an uncle that flew for the airlines, and I thought I wanted to do that at one point. And he said, he's like, don't become a pilot, an airline pilot, because you'll lose the passion. And so I kind of kept the passion by doing other things. Nowadays, I have a commercial airplane pilot license and also a commercial helicopter pilot license. But I really play in the policy world and try to make sure that all those things, we're a very heavily regulated industry nowadays. I try to make sure that there's room for really important evolutions like what we're doing at Joby.
Sure. I mean, you look at something like air travel, and there's over 10,000 flights every single day. Well, not this week maybe, but on a typical day, I think there's something like 13,000 flights a day. And people could understand why you would want it regulated. I mean, it makes sense. It's even more so than cars. Cars can drive maybe into a building somewhere or into other cars, but planes can fly into anything. I mean, you can just
not a lot of tolerance for mistakes in aviation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry. I was going to say the history of that is really wild. If you look at how aviation became regulated, federally regulated, the Wright brothers launched this world of flying. And then in the 1920s, we've all heard the stories about the barnstorming era, the wild things that were happening in the Wild West in the barnstorming era. And it became apparent to those folks that were building airplanes and were starting to operate those airplanes that if it was unsafe, the population, the public wasn't going to want to embrace this. And so they actually started to push saying, like, we need to be regulated. We need federal regulations to keep us safe as an industry. And so in like 1926, the U.S. government created the Mail Carrier Act, which started to regulate those mail carriers. That was the big use for aviation back then. And they started to regulate the way that the pilots would take training. They did like an equipment checklist on these biplanes at the time. And then they started to create like the early air traffic system. It's a wild history. If you look at what the first air traffic system was, they started to put big bonfires every 10 miles on like mountain peaks across the country so that those air carrier male pilots could fly bonfire to bonfire safely. Eventually, those became like light beacons
Mm-hmm.
as electrification started to get a little more common. And then it became radio beacons, and then the FAA bought radar and replaced all that. And these were always like leading edge advances. So we went from bonfires to lights to radar using radio. Radio was like an advancement too at the time, like talking to you on a radio and then flipping frequencies and talking to you on the next frequency. That was like advanced thinking back in the 1940s, right? And because this stuff became federated and like the government made these big purchases, now you can see where we are, right? It moves at the pace of pond water now.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this more in a business sense than regulation, but I've been part of Black Rifle Coffee, and it's a consumable, right? So there's a doing forecasting can always be difficult, right? Because there's source materials, but there's also the production process, and then the shipping process as well, and then storage and all this other stuff. Now I own
Yeah,
a
the lead times are crazy, right? And
yeah
you have to make big predictions. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Now I own a hard seltzer company, and now we depend on aluminum and other. It's always sort of the same but different, and you know, especially as a company that's still kind of in startup mode. I'm trying to predict when my marketing effort is going to hit and where, in addition to my, whatever retail expansion I'm working on, and then how much inventory I'm going to need for that point, right? And I have to, there's sometimes up to 16 weeks lead time for certain products, and there's not a lot of room for error there because, some people say that. Well, one, you don't want to run out of stuff. I think that's probably worse than anything. That's worse than making too much from my perspective.
Feeling like you missed the market. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like every time somebody walks by a shelf and my product's not on there, that's a sale that I've lost, and I don't like that. Yeah, it becomes really difficult to forecast stuff like that. And then you map that onto government, and you're talking about administrations, right? You're talking about 4-year cycles, and that's an absolute fucking shit show. Anybody that's ever worked for the government knows just how incompetent they are. And sometimes it's not like everybody thinks this or that about, corruption or the government's evil or whatever. Usually it's just stupid people, or it's a checklist that needs to be looked over once that is federally required to be looked over 4 or 5 times. And it's that you've essentially created duplication of effort, inefficiencies, and all this stuff. And add that on top of the fact that it's a 4-year cycle where entire policies can change. And this becomes really difficult for an organization that's managed by the federal government to at least some degree to operate in modernity, in my opinion. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that because you're with Joby now, and you guys are reinventing some stuff that kind of exists but kind of doesn't. I mean, you're definitely pushing the envelope in a lot of ways. And should the private companies and airlines and stuff be in charge of ATC, for example, or be in charge of TSA, for example, because it'll, like in my opinion, as a capitalist person, the skill level, the competence, and just the numbers of these people available will grow and recede with the need, not necessarily based on a Congress making some law somewhere, which they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. You know what I mean?
It's you paint the picture well. We're living in a world where a lot is regulated, and the pendulum of how those regulations are going to fall swings far. And so if it's swinging from side to side, it's really hard to predict what you should be doing. I mean, I have always tried to focus on that middle ground and making sure that we're looking at a long term, what is right for the country, what's right for the industry, what's right for, I'm an aviation guy. So like, how do we keep aviation moving in a successful, evolving, helpful direction over the long arc of this swinging pendulum of how politics is going to go? And what that means is having like very real, tangible, honest conversations with politicians at all levels and the working class folks within the government and the industry itself, right? Trying to keep us all in that constant path forward of success. And that's really the only way. And it's a lot of work. It is a grind. It's not flashy as things can look, but it works. And so I'll tell you, like, if you look at what's happened, we talked quickly about the barnstorming age of aviation. That became the jet age, right? So the jet age was born, and the FAA really solidified into a monolith of an agency regulating air travel that everyone knows today. And so we're trying to bring into that world something brand new, right? We, but yet we don't want to have to be adjacent. We want to integrate in with the skies today, like traditional helicopters, traditional airplanes do. And so it was really important to begin the conversation saying, hey, these electric aircraft that can take off and land vertically and fly on their wings, they're piloted. We're carrying passengers to and from existing airports and existing heliports and new infrastructure. But mostly the same as what you've seen before, FAA and all the friends in the government, to make sure that the conversation was tangible and real, like not having to work outside the framework. And so with success there, then we started to talk about what edges have to be rounded to make that experience really special for the American public. And for example, when you hail an Uber today and jump in an Uber, you don't have to show up an hour before for that Uber. But for the airlines, I mean, if you don't show up an hour before, you're late, right? Some people are there 2 hours before. But that's not the experience for what we're doing here, right? Light aviation, general aviation, helicopters, that's not the requirement. You show up and you go on your flight. And so there's this patchwork of sterile airports and traditional aviation infrastructure that's more publicly accessible. And we're fitting into the fabric of that. And we're trying to bring people the use of the air in ways that they haven't been able to use before. I feel very fortunate. As a kid, I started to learn to flying these little Cessnas and Pipers around. I remember taking friends up when I was like 17 years old and then just being shocked at people being able to fly around the skies in the United States the way that you're able to. I mean, very small portion of the U.S. airspace is controlled. And so that also is an asset. And so to kind of touch on your last bit of that conversation, Dan, that asset does need to have a federal angle, and there are things that private industry can do to make it incredibly used much more efficiently. I've never been at a point in time in my life of being a passionate aviation guy where I've been so bullish on the idea that we can actually get it right in this next era of air traffic control. I think when you look across the stakeholders, when you look across the airlines, when you look across the business jet and private aviation world, when you look across the air traffic controllers themselves, when you look across the ground infrastructure folks, everybody thinks this is the moment to do something bold and smart. And I'm hopeful in ways I haven't been ever. I didn't know that this moment would come along, but we were really at a unique point in time with some folks that want to make some good change inside the government in the airspace.
Yeah, the innovation component for me is it's the most meaningful part of it because aside from just the, I guess, general excitement you get from new technology and modalities of travel and what it can mean for people. I've talked to one of your colleagues at Joby about this actually, like the ability to live in the country and work in the city without that being obtrusive to the environment itself. And I don't mean the environment in the leftist sense, just the environment as we know it, but also that being an efficient thing for people is very good, right? I mean, it's just for all the reasons that human beings need to be outside and being closer to the food that they grow and blah, 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 all of the reasons that you can listen to on Andrew Huberman's podcast probably, but they all make sense. But there's no way to do it right now in a meaningful way. There's the work from home stuff is one part of it, but there's you lose a lot, in my opinion, of the social interaction working from home. That is a Band-Aid on a problem that needs to be fixed. And the other part of it is that the way you guys are approaching this shows that the company and the visionaries at it have learned from history. If you've gone to business school or know anything about, there's a couple of key principles in business economics that you should be familiar with, and one of them is the story of the railroads. The railroads thought they were in the railroad business, but in reality they were in the transportation business. And right under their nose, aviation and trucking became the dominant forms of moving product and people around the country. And they should have had a monopoly on that, like Union Pacific, Western, whatever the fuck. All of these companies that were doing railroad stuff at the time and had
They
spent
had every advantage,
they had
right? They had the
every advantage.
property.
They
They
had
had
already spent all the money on all the easements, all the permit, all the stuff that you would need to just build a road or a freeway right next to the railroad that you already built, or a runway right next to the railroad you already built on the easement that you own. You know what I mean? They had every advantage to do that, but instead they thought they were in the railroad business. So you don't. When's the last time you were on a train? And it's just not smart. So this is all of the things that I like about technology and business moving into the future, learning from history, being truly innovative in a way that benefits people, not just as a way to cash in on a trend that's going on. This is something people have been talking about this stuff for a while, but this is what Joby's doing is truly innovative. So I really enjoy that, and I think another part of that with regard to the federal system is we do have mechanisms. Like people get really frustrated with how slow and incompetent government can be, but we do have constitutional mechanisms to make things work. One of the best examples in history of that is this guy named Bill Newton. You're probably familiar with him. If you're not, I'll tell you a little about him. In ancient Rome, there was a dictator position, and the dictator position was typically a 6-month term of office. It was an appointed office by the consul in the Senate of Rome, the consuls rather in the Senate of Rome, that you're in charge of the aqueducts. We need aqueduct repair done, and you're a dictator, which means dictator to speak. What you say is law. Everybody is required by law to follow everything you say to get that problem fixed. And we don't really have that in our modern system, but we kind of do because you could make the case that Bill Newton was the modern dictator in the traditional Roman sense because we had a big problem going into the Pacific Theater during World War II. We didn't have enough planes to drop enough bombs on these islands in Japan to win that war. And nothing was working. And Bill Newton was the president / chief operating officer, I think, of GM at the time. He's one of the guys that revolutionized factory assembly lines. And FDR called him up and he's like, hey, we need help. So go to Montana and figure it out. And he went up there and built a city, and they made him a lieutenant general in the Army, commissioned him directly as a 3-star general, and said, you're in charge of all of this. Everybody reports to you. And he got it done. So we don't have to go extrajudicially or overthrow the government every time or fucking whatever people just extremists like to say. There are constitutional remedies for all this stuff, and that's one right there, to be honest. Now, not to say that Joby needs a constitutional remedy to fix you. You guys are a private industry, so you can do whatever you want. But people, I guess the way that it's happening now in the 2020s is with government contracts like SpaceX, and then tax rebates like Tesla and you guys and stuff like that. These are important things. This public-private partnership is what precipitated the end of World War II. It's what made the interstate highway system. It's what made the railroads back in the day. This is something that's really important. I understand why people don't want taxpayer monies going to frivolous nonsense, but when it's something that can, if it's an investment that could allow you to live out in the green somewhere and then come work in the gray and then go back to the green, I feel like people should be on board with that.
Listen, you just threw so many amazing nuggets out there that are worth like deep conversations. But on this last one to start, we are so fortunate. Our forefathers out of World War II built not only the highway system and we had the train system before that, but they built the public airports around this country. The U.S. has over 5,000 public use airports, like paved runways over 3,000 feet. Like that is second to none. That's amazing. So originally they built around 6,000. Now there's 5,000 was left, like 5,080, something like that. When you add the heliport infrastructure on top of that, there's like 10,000 pieces of public use and private use aviation infrastructure around this country. No other place on earth has that. There's like a NASA study that says that each American is less than a 15-minute car ride away from that infrastructure. So you think about that, it's very underutilized. It's kind of decaying. A lot of those airports have been closed over the last 20 years, but now we're at this new era in aviation. So the jet age has panned out to be incredibly important. If you were in the 50s saying like, hey, instead of riding a ship across the ocean for 2 weeks, you're going to jump on a plane and you're going to be in Europe in 7 hours, people would say like, that's not something I'll ever do. But now it's something people do all the time, right? People commute back and forth across the oceans on the airlines nowadays, weekly.
Mm.
And so what we're bringing to the world, this new era of aviation, there's a whole industry growing up around Joby, is the ability to start using the sky in effective ways for our own transportation. I'm sure the world is aware of the drone industry and what
Mm.
deliveries are going to start looking like. Now, people are going to love that and embrace that. And we all want that. And we're very worried about it, right?
Mm.
We'll say, like, it has to be safe. So absolutely needs to be regulated in some way. It has to not spy. I don't want it spying on me. I don't want drones flying right over my yard. I don't want, to worry about the noise of these aircraft. But if it's all the good and none of the bad, that'd be amazing. And so, how do you balance that?
Mm.
We've been focused really hard on trying to get there and to answer those questions the right way. And that's been a big dialogue with FAA and Department of Transportation and the broader, Congress and Senate, the House and Senate. And we're kind of in an amazing spot where nowadays the rules and regulations are in place. The federal system is ready for us to start operation. We're moving through the final stages of certifying these vehicles to be able to start operating service.
Mm.
And so as you kind of leaned on here, the win-win, the thing we're all really cheering for, we're kind of on the verge of it. It sounds crazy. I agreed. When I joined Joby, back in the 2016 timeframe, it was kind of a non-recognized, non-understood space, and certainly seemed crazy. We've now flown over 50,000 miles. We have many aircraft flying over the world. Next week, we'll be flying at the Dubai Air Show, ADB flights. We just announced propeller production in Dayton, Ohio yesterday. An amazing, on the front with the Secretary of War. The Secretary of War just had like the reverse of what they call the Last Supper. Remember the Last Supper meeting that they had back in the 90s where they consolidated all the industry? Essentially had the reverse of that meeting last week. Our CEO was fortunate to be in that audience of a very small crew when the Secretary of War was calling on everybody to, like, we need all the best tech to protect the United States and lean forward and move fast. These are wildly exciting times, and I think that can be amazing and wonderful. It can make you anxious, and I think we're working very diligently to try to keep the excitement and quell the anxiety that it can bring to folks. But as you pointed out, we don't want the government to totally manage that equation for us. We want the industry to manage it, and we need some safe checks and balances. I love the parallel you drew with how you can kind of set a key individual responsible within the government to make sure execution goes well. These are exciting times.
I agree. I think, a lot of the time with new technology, that you'll hear, especially in Silicon Valley in the 2010s and 2020s, you would hear like we're gonna make the world a better place. That was a lot of people's tagline for it. I'm like, okay, well, that sounds great, but let's dig into that a little bit, because these apps, these new technologies, whatever they happen to be, they will purport to make us more efficient. And when they say efficient, they typically mean get more work done, which is not efficiency, that's productivity. Those are two very different things. But what if efficiency means you can find a way to spend more time with your family, right? What if efficiency means that you're out in the sun more while still working at a city job, which, by the way, we've proven that that's the best way. In person, high density population areas are the best way to run companies. Sorry. I mean, Elon makes this point all the time, but it's indisputable. That is the best way to run a company. However, it's not the best way for a human being to live their life necessarily. What if you could do both, as you said? What if you could achieve both of these things at the same time, and do so, by the way, without having at a much lower cost than you should expect, and a much lower I won't say ecological footprint necessarily because that's not a concern of mine, but the like when you're talking about a helicopter style aircraft, there is no runway, right? So in the space that it takes to maintain and take off airplanes every day, I could put 10,000 Joby helicopters, basically, right? And so it's not like the scalability isn't even a problem. The scalability is how fast can I print these parts and put these things to fucking together. That's the scalability issue, right? I mean, I can't, I've been talking to Baker's a friend of ours, and I've had Michael on the show before, just trying to brainstorm how can this be a bad idea? Just trying to steel man the counter argument to it, and I really can't think of what the bad part of this might be, frankly, unless Skynet takes over, and then we got bigger problems at that point. But yeah, I mean, do you guys do that? Do you red sell your own product? Like, okay, here, especially you in government services. Sometimes you got to do that. You're like, all right, what are these people going to say that's negative, and how do I respond to that? Because it's not always just about having the right response. It's also about, oh shit, maybe they're right. Now we can improve our product and eliminate that issue that they might have. That's the reason, in business that you do red cell training. So do you guys do any of that stuff? And what issues have you found in the process, I guess, and corrected before it's even to market?
Yeah, it's such an important piece of the conversation. In fact, the way I would couch it is that's all we're almost ever doing is circling back and asking ourselves the question: what if, why, how do we make sure this doesn't happen or that doesn't happen? And my measure of how well we're doing is as I listen to the world. If I hear something we haven't ever thought of or considered, then I'm concerned, right, that we're not doing our job deeply enough. And I will say I don't recall conversations where that's happened. I feel like we've stayed ahead of it. Now some of that is organic because the people that are raising questions are in and out of the circle. But these are things like the most common question I think we'll hear is if you're hovering and one of those propellers stops working, what happens, right? And so we've actually designed this aircraft in a way so that each of those propellers is turned by two motors, right? They're dual redundant motors. They don't look like it, but there's two motors in there turning each propeller. And if one of those motors goes down, they're solid state devices. So, you're well aware of how reliable the motors are on Tesla, for example, but they're solid state devices. So not a lot that can fail, some bearings and solid state electronics. But if something happened to that motor, it's dual redundant in there. So an entire second set of motor controllers and batteries are controlling that same propeller. So the pilot gets a light, right? And the electronics keep you safe. And then you say, well, what if that one fails too, right? And we've actually designed the architecture to be redundant yet again. And so these are the kind of conversations we go through on the safety side. And then we go through the conversations about engaging this into the world. So the questions become, what are the interests going to be of people in this world? Today, the number one complaint about aviation is noise. And it's by people who are living around airports who don't use that airport every day. It's folks that, it's property that has lower value because folks at the airport, living in those houses around the airport, they're enduring the noise. So there is absolutely this world that we're trying to bring about where we flip that equation, where we're bringing this brand of aviation to neighborhoods where it's super safe, quiet, and cost effective. You kind of hit those points. And it's something they want to use, right? It's like all of a sudden we just put the node to this network so I can walk to it and I can connect to all these other places out and around my rural community or my city or my town. That adds to my life, and that is a boost to the property. So helping the government and helping communities understand that done right, this can actually flip that historic equation and make people want to live in these places and make it whole. Like, I want this thing. Like, that's the win that we're hunting for. And I think that's it. I know you're feeling that, but that's where we want to be spending our time. It takes a ton of red shirting to make sure that we do that right, though.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you look on a rental or home buying portal, you'll get a walkable score. It's like how much stuff can I walk to from and I love that, to be honest, especially if you're a younger person and you want to live in a place where you can just get home from work and walk to dinner somewhere, to go to the bars or whatever. It's if you live in a city, it's a great thing. It'd be something entirely different though to see how close you were to a Joby hub, so that I can, oh, you're like, I mean, it's when I lived in Oakland for a while, and every house you look to buy out there in the Bay Area tells you exactly how far away you are from a BART stop, so you can jump on it and go to the
Yeah.
city or whatever, right? This is going to be part of real estate in the future for sure. It'll be part of it, and I'm curious, about some of these problems to solve, because nobody wants to live near an airport. It's loud as shit. But certainly there's going to be some sound signature from the rotor wash on your stuff. But a lot of it comes. A lot of people who have been around helicopters, it's very loud. The rotor wash can be loud, but the engines turning are what really creates noise. I don't know if you've been around a Tesla, but it doesn't make a lot of noise because it's not exploding constantly. Like there's no explosions making pistons fire. It's a very different system. How would you compare your, I guess, sound signature to the sound signature of like a six little bird or something like that, something a similar size?
Yeah. So this is a critical piece for us. So the way we kind of wrapped and stacked issues, safety was top priority, as aviation needs to be. So needs to meet the expected top safety bar of commercial aviation, being able to move folks. But our close second slash third, so between the cost of accessibility, making sure this is something we can all actually do, and then noise, those were like our one and two, or sorry, point two and three combined issues. So on noise, as you just stated really well, the electric motor itself is silent, so we take away a portion of the noise. But that wasn't enough for us, so we kind of looked really hard at propeller noise and rotor noise and analyzed that. And we spent about the first 6 years of the company, and this is when we were deep in secret mode. We spent analyzing ways to really cut back on noise. And actually behind me there, this is a propeller. I'll grab it for you here.
Sure.
This is a special propeller that we designed. And so what's so special about this is if you look at the cord of this propeller. So this is the cord as opposed to the length of the propeller. So that cord is very big cord. And what that cord does is it pushes a ton of air with every pass, right? And so that lets us slow down the rotational speed. So the tip speed gets really low. And that tip speed is really what generates the majority of the noise. So we're able to really cut back on airplane propeller noise by doing that, and our aircraft propeller noise. Now, to do that, you've got to make a wild motor, a super, super torquey motor, right? And we originally looked at doing that with gearboxes and found that the maintenance and the moving parts of gearboxes was problematic. And we went to a special kind of motor that we make ourselves, kind of there behind me. And that motor is super torquey. It has an outrunner magnet. It makes a ton of torque, very low RPMs in flight, that lets us push these passes of air. And I'm telling you, it is a spiritual moment when you come out to Joby and watch us hover in front of you and fly overhead, because it is crazy quiet.
It's so much different. Like just I love having engineers on to talk about it, because the way everything you're explaining right there, like I've tried to explain to people why without a literal rocket engine, you can't make a combustion engine that'll be faster off the line than an electric engine because of the conservation of energy, right? I mean, every single one of those junction points, you lose energy from the piston to the flywheel to the drivetrain to the tire, the wheels. You lose energy at each one of those, right? That is not the case with electricity. As a matter of fact, you can have those two primary motors plus redundant motors on the outside part of it that are using even less energy, by the way, because it's already spinning. They're just keeping it moving. That you will never be able to. No combustion engine will ever be able to compete with that. It just doesn't work that way, right? So you're saying, in addition to that, the sound signature is also low, just like it would be an electric car. I guess that's the point I'm getting at.
That's it. And so what you're going to have is two things happen there. In overflight, this is when most people get annoyed. If you look at noise complaints in New York City around airports, it's overflight noise. So the aircraft is coming over, it's casting, it's a couple thousand feet typically, it's on approach, it's casting its noise across a huge footprint, right? If you think how far below that wedge of that aircraft, and it's dragging that across the city, just millions of people are hearing that thing. And it's not like so acute that you're like holding your ears, but it like annoyed you for a second. You were concentrating on something and like, so loud, and one after the next, it can start to drive you nuts. So what we've been able to do is take that overflight noise to about 45 decibels at 1,000 feet. So 1,000 feet is really low. Typically 3,000 feet, we have no sound hitting the ground that's measurable. At 45 decibels, to be clear, is so quiet, it's whisper quiet.
Yeah, this
And
conversation we're having right now is 85 decibels, give or take.
yeah,
Right,
and
maybe
remember,
90.
super nerdy, but the scale is logarithmic, and so that's like 1,000 times more acoustic energy.
Correct, yes.
now,
Yep.
now ears are attuned to like grading that up and down, so we can hear it. But nonetheless, the point is crazy quiet. We actually, so that's one thing, is the volume, and the second thing I'll just portray to you on noise. And this is such a nerdy noise conversation, but it's interesting to me anyway.
It's not nerdy to people who are going to live near these things, I can tell you that. Or people who can walk out onto the runway or the flight line and just let it land right next to them, like something out of fucking Star Wars, and then get
While you're
into
still
it.
talking to each other,
Yeah, man, while you're on the phone or something like that. It's crazy. Like, that's not nerd.
Yeah.
I mean, it is kind of nerdy still, but it's like, this is relevant information.
And this is why it's so important, the volume. So that's all the volume we talked about. Now, there's one giant second half of this equation, is the character of the noise. What the heck does that mean? So you've probably got direct experience with this, Dan. When you're out in the desert walking around, and very, very quietly there's a helicopter on the horizon, you can pick it out because it's going whop, 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 whop. It's a mechanical, human-made noise, very quiet, but its tone, its signature is breaking the difference of nature, right? And so you, as a human, you're attuned to that change. And even though it's really quiet and really mixed in the background noise, you know it's there. And that's when a lot of adversaries are jumping on cell phones and saying, like, they're here, right? And so what we've been able to do is actually get rid of that characteristic too. And so the way we've done that is we have designed our propellers in ways that make a much more natural frequency. And if you jump on YouTube, you'll be able to see some videos where we overflew some traditional aircraft, and then our aircraft, the S4, one after the next. They were each around, I think it was like 1,500 feet and 100 knots. So very, very fair comparison, very similar size aircraft. We flew them ourselves, one after the next. And you'll see the signature shape, and you'll see that mechanical noise on traditional aircraft, and then you'll see the Joby noise. Very quiet, so small signature, but also the character of that signature has none of the peaks and valleys the way mechanical systems do. So now you know everything you need to know about noise. We can move beyond noise.
Well, I was a paratrooper, and getting troops into combat is a big thing for us. This idea of using the air to get troops into combat, I believe, began with Benjamin Franklin talking about using hot air balloons, which technically I think the Australians still have a program for it. I think it's a nostalgia program. I don't think they're actually going to use it for anything, because that would be crazy. But this idea of using this as a military application because it's quiet. We had a theoretical version of it in the early 2010s for the AH-64 Black Hawk, right? So it was used on the Bin Laden raid. It didn't even have a name. It was so classified. That's one of the things I like to say. But the main thing they did, aside from muffling the engine noise, was to change the props, right?
That's right. The shape. That's right.
Yeah, the shape of the props. So this is like, maybe it's nerdy, but that's really fucking interesting to me. Like, from a practical commercial aviation sense, for sure, but also for the military. The ability to use low sound plus low radar signature stuff to actually get somebody on the ground somewhere is a pretty big deal. That's a really big deal, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many great directions to talk, but one of the things I think would be valuable to touch on here is where this stuff goes from here. So these vehicles are now on the final threshold of certification. We are delivering these aircraft, so we'll be flying in Dubai next week. We've already been flying in Dubai. We flew for weeks at the Osaka World Expo. U.S. service is going to be launching soon, and the EIPP, the President's eVTOL Integrated Pilot Program, will be launching next summer. We'll be flying around cities all over the country, and then real deep commercial service starting once we finish certification with the FAA. So that's all happening. Also exciting, America 250th, the 250th anniversary of the country, right? So all this stuff coming together is kind of a really exciting moment to celebrate. So we plan to kind of join those two things together across the country and really do some celebration of this next era of aviation. But what's beyond that? So at Joby, one of the things we've been doing, we don't talk a lot about what's beyond that, but we're flying some cool stuff. And so we make our own motors and our own batteries and our own electronics. We are deep in our vertical tech stack. Some teasers, we flew this aircraft you've seen. We flew it on liquid hydrogen to prove that it could be done. It was under an Air Force contract. Liquid hydrogen, and you can make electricity, with hydrogen through a fuel cell.
And the
So
output is water.
and the output's water.
Yeah.
Exactly. So and the reason liquid hydrogen is interesting is, hydrogen gas, you have to contain it in a big pressure vessel, and that can be kind of explosive in nature, just the pressure of it.
Yeah.
But liquid hydrogen is more like you have to keep it cold. So you can kind of make a flask, like something that keeps something cold, and it's not under all that much pressure, right? You just a nice insulated flask full of hydrogen, and you use it as it kind of boils off. And you can make some aircraft that have crazy long endurances, something that doesn't really exist today. So we demoed that and proved that. And that's a really exciting trend line of technology. We also have been deep in autonomy. So everything I've been talking about so far has been, we have pilots on board, commercial airplane pilots that take type ratings and get trained to fly this aircraft safely. And the initial service will be a piloted service. But for the military, they're really interested in ultra long duration and endurance. They're also interested in autonomy. So imagine your experience if we could dispatch an aircraft with nobody on board to go pick somebody up and bring them back. Today, when you dispatch an aircraft to pick somebody up, you've got a wedge of protection with that aircraft, right? You have a pilot that's going to go out, even a helicopter pilot, a fighter pilot. One pilot needs to be protected with Overwatch. You need to have all kinds of assets there to keep that person safe and potentially bring them back if something happens. If the aircraft goes with no pilot but can bring people back, that's a game changer. And so that's another advent that's coming. There's so many really exciting things that you're going to see in the next 5 years. I'm not going to allude to some of the wildest ones, but I'll be back to talk about them as we announce them in the future.
Yeah, we'll keep those. There's a lot of stuff about that 250th celebration next year that I know as well that people are gonna. I'll say that it's fun that we have the guy in office that we have in office right now, plus all the people he knows, mutual friends of ours, I'm sure, that are involved in technology and stuff like that. That it's going to be a really fun week. It's going to be really fun. Tell me, you mentioned the excuse me, the EIPP a few times. Explain that for people because I'm not sure everybody knows what that is. I mean, it was one of the executive orders he signed in the Oval, but explain it what it does, please.
Yeah. So imagine you're kind of the ruler of a big important country, and you're at this advent of a new era of aviation. One of the things that President Trump has done, he has signed an executive order that will allow us to begin, communities themselves will actually put their hands up. It's actually a community plan. So communities, municipalities, and communities will put their hand up and say, I want to launch this new service, this new aircraft service in my community, moving from these locations and providing this kind of transportation service or this kind of cargo service or this kind of first responder service. And a minimum of 5, the theory is it could be as many as 10 states and municipalities are going to be chosen here in the spring that get to launch service ahead of formal certification. So kind of an advanced launch of this industry is going to occur in the spring/summer, which will roll us into formal certification. That program will extend across when formal certification happens. So these communities will be the first to get to experience these kinds of transportation, and then it will roll out across the country beyond that. And there's a lot of excitement in Texas. I'll be clear with you. Senator Cruz is a really important leader in the Senate with respect to aviation and commerce, and they have made it clear that Texas is going to play a big part because that's an important node. We've also looked, many states all over the country are raising their hands to play in the space, and we're hoping to be part of that with many of them. So we have been working across the country with all of the key municipalities to make sure that we can provide that advanced opportunity to all of those who win the EIPPs. We're gonna be excited to do that. So crazy close opportunities. I am looking forward to a year from now, when ideally you're flying with us on some of these VIP routes and ready to traditional certification commercial ops.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, and if you've ever wondered, I'm gonna shift for a second. Why there, or how rather, there are dozens of products and apps available immediately when a new iPhone comes out. It's typically because, or it's because Apple gives developers this, either the specs or the actual hardware or software to build and program around and stuff like that. And this is an important thing, but it also works inversely when you're a company that's working inside of a regulated environment. You kind of have to talk with regulators on a regular basis to make sure that you're meeting, as you mentioned before, the either at or exceeding the top level safety requirements. Joby usually shoots for exceeding the top level safety requirements, just like Tesla does. How are you guys working with the regulators right now to make sure that all that's done? And then also part of that conversation, as you know, in government ops, is saying, hey, congressman or senator or whatever, this regulation right here doesn't actually make sense, and here's why. Here's the paper, the white paper, the research that shows why this regulation, not only is it not effective, but it actually might be causing more issues. That's a whole process. What's the process like for you guys doing that? I'm sure you're deeply involved in it.
Yeah. I think trying to have foresight and understanding how things have gone awry in the past is important. Also having vision about where things need to go. Because as you began this conversation today, there's a pendulum swinging back and forth. And if you aren't following that straight path to the end goal line, if you're kind of getting swayed, like you're not going to get where you need to be. So you need to have that forward vision saying, we want to end up in a world where there's this new era of aviation that's accessible for American people to move in these crazy efficient ways. And being driven to that, that becomes a really good moniker where others can kind of latch on and follow.
Yeah, I like that. I like, you even inside of the regulatory environment, you still have to be the leader sometimes. If you're the one with the great idea, which is why, people like Elon will often take so much heat because you're pressing the issue all the time. If you're like, whoa, slow down, guys, like, no, I'm not going to slow down. It's catch up. That's always his response, which I appreciate. And you guys have done, there's so much wild shit coming, but you guys have already done so many things, and have also benefited, I think, from the partnership with NVIDIA and the way that they've been able to stay ahead of the chip game. They're the number one name in the game, and this issue of your super pilot autonomy system, the solution to it will always be just like any other sort of AI or tech problem is compute, right? We have to build as much compute as possible, as small as possible, using as little energy as possible. That's our goal always, right? Are you guys, how are you seeing that process go? Are you limited by something? Because we've had some chip problems. The CHIPS Act is supposed to be helping. You mentioned a factory in Ohio. There's a chip factory going up in Ohio pretty soon. And then, of course, sourcing rare earth minerals and things like that. It's a very, not convoluted necessarily, but there's a lot of moving parts to make all that work correctly. How are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, it's a really good flag. And so, there's an additional degree of difficulty when it comes to using some of these chips in aviation. So classically, we don't get access to the best chips in aviation because you need to show a heritage of credibility in the devices, right? So you have to show a heritage of safety. You also have to control the production. And that can be really, really hard to do in aviation. We don't control chip production. How could we make sure that every chip we're buying is representative of the one we tested? And classically, you haven't had the buy-in of those chip manufacturers because aviation purchases are so small, so few. So this partnership with NVIDIA is novel for Joby. They chose us as the aviation entity to kind of bring their safety chip into the world. And by having that level of support, the ability to use the documentation, to have documentation and control of production, that's something that doesn't happen. And being able to bring this device through into aviation this way will kind of let what we're working on sprawl into directions that are amazingly powerful. You mentioned Superpilot. This is a capability that we've developed to operate aircraft in the civil airspace autonomously. And so we've been flying Caravans, Cessna Caravans, which are a large single-engine turbine cargo airplane. So we've been flying those in the airspace, working with FAA through approvals, but we don't need special use airspace. So these aircraft are flying themselves. A person on the ground is actually doing the air traffic control conversation, talking to air traffic controllers through the aircraft while sitting on the ground, to kind of let these autonomous aircraft fly safely in the system. So you can imagine that those capabilities are also wildly exciting for the Department of War to be able to, I mean, 99.9% of the flying they do is in civil airspace, right? It's very few conflict region flights. And so for them to be able to move more and more assets, that's an amazing capability. So we're very excited about where super pilot technology is going. And then, I described for you, we're doing a lot of these flights with pilots on board in the early days, but over time, as people get very comfortable, we'll move to autonomy. And I think as autonomy on the ground gets common, people will look at autonomy in the air and it will just be ubiquitous for them. I think it sounds a little scary for a moment, but if you put yourself in a framework of like the 1950s, I'm always looking back as well as forward, right? So in the 1950s, people were debating the elevator man, the person working on the elevator, right? And would you get on an elevator that doesn't have an elevator man? That sounds crazy, right? Back in the 1950s, that was the debate. And nowadays we kind of scoff at that. We're like, oh, come on, it's of course, like I've never even seen an elevator man, most people. If I ask you, like, are you comfortable getting on a tram, an autonomous tram at the airport? You'll say, like, of course, no big deal. Like, it's linear, it's straightforward. When you throw in the second degree, so 2 degrees of freedom, and you say a car, you get a little worried, right? Oh man, that's a lot. And then if I throw in the third degree, I think you get like a little more worried, right? So this is kind of how we as society start to understand and accept these things. But before we know it, these will all be common practice.
Yeah, and there's not just in the commercial space, but in the military space as well. I've done a little bit on this, but if you really want to hear great breakdowns of it, go check out my buddy Max Afterburners, his YouTube account. He was on the show about a month ago. But this new F-47 is aside from the Blue Force Tracker style AI that it'll have to manage the battle space and shit like that. It also has this CCA or collaborative combat aircraft, they're calling it, which is it's an autonomous drone that fly. It's basically like a wingman that's autonomous, or like what's the I can't remember the name of it, but the Falcon from the Avengers movies. He had that little sidekick dude on his back. It's basically like that, but it's an aircraft that can do all sorts of stuff. I mean, this stuff is coming sooner than you think. It will become part of daily life.
And what's even more poignant to that is that, in the US, since the dawn of aviation, we've led the pace. We've set the standards around the world. The FAA kind of created all of the way that we license pilots, the way we navigate in the airspace, the way we do safety oversight of the design and production of aircraft. That's all based on FAA. And it became a global standard through ICAO and went around the world. There's small modifications, but really the global standard was set by FAA once upon a time. And so the debate is now, we know there are technologies being developed all over the world. U.S. industry, in my opinion, is leading the way in these still, but we're seeing people in China really pushing forward, and the government in China at the highest level is accelerating those things, right? Autonomy, low altitude airspace, knocking down their rules and supporting their industry. And so you can kind of feel that we're at a time where the U.S. can continue to lead the next 100 years, or we can kind of fall down and miss that. I am very confident we'll continue to lead, and pointing out some of these threats is the way that we'll do that. But it's no joke. Like, it is something we have to really continue to put our shoulders behind. Our smartest, our best and brightest in private industry and the government really need to keep us at the forefront here so that everybody can experience what we all want to happen. We all want flying cars. We all want to move around these ways. And it's at hand, and a lot beyond that as well.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when that date rolled around from Back to the Future and we didn't have flying cars and hoverboards, I was super pissed, just like everybody else. It looks like we're going to hit it about 20 years later, so I guess I don't know what the margin of error on something like that would be from 1985, but yeah, it's definitely coming now. And aside from there's obvious defense applications, and that's good because it helps drive the tech. It also helps stress test the tech. You know what I mean? I mean, one of the things that you'll see in the commercial space is military grade or military tested or something like that. And sometimes it's a marketing term, but sometimes it means we put this shit in the desert somewhere or the jungle somewhere and hit it with a bat a bunch of times and it didn't break. So it's probably not going to break somewhere in the Midwest. And now you guys are going to, as this thing progresses and it becomes more ubiquitous, you're going to face the same trouble that everybody else does, which is scalability. I think I don't know how many your Dayton facility I think makes like 15 or 20,000 props a year or something like that. I mean that's a lot. It sounds like a lot, and then you're having to put 10,000 of these things up a year, and that's not a lot anymore.
Yeah. So first on your Back to the Future comment, I will tell you my favorite shirt is a Joby shirt that says "I want to believe" with the Back to the Future car, the DeLorean flying on the front. It's my favorite shirt. I think it's an unofficial shirt, but absolutely agree with you. We're going to bring that reality really, really quickly here. That's super exciting. So production, such a cool question because 10 years ago, people would say electric flight is impossible. Batteries are too heavy, right? And you couldn't convince people.
Yeah.
And then we did
100%.
it. Like we flew and they saw it and said like, wow, okay, well, we can fly, but you'll never get the government on board to allow this to fly in the airspace and to certify. You'll never get the government on board. And here we are. Government's totally on board. President Trump's EIPP is in place to accelerate it, right? And so then the question becomes, can you make enough of these things so that they could fly enough people? That's the coolest question. And that's like when the fun begins. And so, yes, today we have production in California, in Marina, California, at a facility. And then up and down the coast, we build parts and components. So that's a capacity we have online now that can build up to about 25 aircraft a year. That's perfect for getting going, for providing some aircraft to Department of War, to making sure we can get aircraft into these early EIPPs, but not nearly enough for the global demand, right? So Dayton, Ohio was a commitment, an opportunity we got to really lean into production. And so we just announced this week airplane propellers being built there. Our aircraft has a crazy number of propellers, right? 30 blades per aircraft. That's like more than anything in production at the moment, I believe. And so we need a lot of blades. And that facility will supply up to the number of blades needed for about 500 aircraft a year. That's what we kind of think the first stretch looks like, getting that kind of production ramped here in the next several years, filling demand across the US, key markets in the world, making sure that some of the partnerships we've made with Delta and with Virgin and with ANA Airlines around the globe start to thrive. And then from there, Toyota is an amazing partner with us on production. So they've leaned in to help us really produce wildly efficiently and more cost effectively. So from there, Toyota can help us ramp into really large numbers of production.
Yeah.
Now, it is way too crazy and bold to imagine you jump right to that, right? You have to do this in a methodical way. So you start with ones and then into tens of aircraft and you learn the lessons and you put those in the field and learn the things and circle back one time or two times till you have it just right. That's the world we're living in now. And then you start to really ramp serious production with serious rates.
Yeah.
It's a wildly exciting time to be in. And I think, Elon, what does he call it? Production hell. So I'm sure that'll be the conversations we're in. But man, we've gone from the unknown impossible to roads that have been trod before. So it will not be easy, but we are in very lucky times.
Yeah, that'll be something. And the last part of that is, affordability. If you've got a product that people can't afford, I mean, this is the Henry Ford lesson, right? I need the people that build my equipment to be able to afford my equipment. That's it's a scalability of your total addressable market, essentially. So what's that look like? What's the process like, I suppose? Because on the one end, there's a lot of R&D costs when you're not making revenue, obviously, even though you might have government contracts and stuff like that are helpful in offsetting some of that. But there's R&D costs, and then, of course, there's the cost of the service itself and into the future. And a product that someone can't afford is not a product. It's an idea still. You know what I mean? So what's that like navigating all that?
Yeah. So, being an aviation guy my whole life, aviation historically is hand built items. Um, Heavy amounts of per hour manual labor going into things. Very federated systems, typically deep supply chains. You're buying big components from a lot of suppliers at a premium cost. And that drives the cost of aviation to be pretty high. We took an entirely different approach. And being a traditional guy, when I first saw it, I'll be honest, my reaction was like, wow, this is going to be a lot. This is a lot to bite off. Um, Having been able to really see the value and the depth of what that means and the speed with which it lets us move and the end result it gets us and the cost that you're pointing out, there is no other way. And I will tell you, I am so impressed with what our teams can pull together. So I actually just grabbed this off the table here. So this is our flight control computer. So we make these ourselves. Typically, these fly-by-wire flight control computers are the size of a briefcase, and they run off huge amounts of power. And so being able to take modern equipment and to distill it down to sizes like this, but yet meet aviation grade integrity and environmental testing and the whole gamut of requirements is novel. And then building that across the airframe gives you such a powerful set of capabilities. And that's kind of why I was alluding to the ability to really grow into a wild, amazing direction over time with all of the vertical production we built. So you're absolutely right. We had to think from the very beginning about what mass production looks like and those typical trade-offs that aviation doesn't decide to do. Aviation numbers typically peak out around 200-300 a year. We truly from the beginning tried to distill into the world of automotive kind of production scales, but in smart ways. And so we built the foundation of the company there. It's not something you can circle back to do. This is not something you can go back and address. Just like sound, the sound profile we've created, it's not something you can circle back and add on. You have to build that from the core of the vehicle. And so making those early decisions took extra time and took extra effort. But man, they're so evident when you start to understand the value.
Yeah, and then the downstream effects of that as well. We think about these new modalities, and there's a cost associated with them, but what are we gaining as well? And that's just your marketing guy is going to have to deal with that shit or whatever PR team you're dealing with, because communicating that stuff is really important. You know what I mean? It's another thing. You have a great idea. Now you've got it. You've made it affordable, but still people either don't know about it or they're like, the first group of people that saw an elevator. They're like, I'm not getting that fucking thing. That death trap is, I'm sure there will be, just go on any Reddit board right now and you can find people calling Joby death traps. I'm sure of it. I'm not even going to look because I know for an absolute fact that that's there. But we said the same thing about every other modality of travel that's ever existed. So, communicating that stuff is a really big part of it. And we're lucky, I think, today, because it might take 10 years to convince a rural country that something is useful and safe and blah, blah, blah. But now it's like a matter of months, to be honest. You know what I mean? The right kind of messaging, and we have, widespread video opportunities and stuff like that. I know at over the next year or so, there's going to be some demonstrations done. And that'll be, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to getting in one of these things, both the piloted and the autonomous version, just to show people I'm lucky to understand and I know people at the company, but also understand the technology from before and how it works and stuff like that. So I feel perfectly comfortable in it. But it's one thing to say that on a show and another thing to go out and actually do it yourself. And I'm really looking forward to that, because I think this is going to be a game changer for this country.
Yeah, we got to get you in it. Absolutely, we're gonna have to fly you around. I think the conversations you have, the listeners of this podcast, it's some of the leading edge. There's this air show in Wisconsin every year called Air Venture, and it's like the biggest air show in the world, but it's very grassroots. It's something that I've been going to forever. And we've been there every year trying to talk to the public as Joby, right? And the question always comes up, like, why are you guys here? Like, it's not going to be a product you sell to the general aviation community. It's going to be a service. It's going to be an airline service. And the answer is because communicating to people who are really thought leaders in the world and letting them understand so they can amplify your message and know, people trust those people. People trust you. And having the ability to have trustworthy, smart people understand what's happening at a core level and then communicate that organically, that's the way. And that's the way we do all of our work. And so I think, the tool that podcasting brings to the table and the tool that just organic communication, it's a game changer to accelerate doing the right things, as you just said. So I'm super excited to that we're in this phase, and I'm kind of really excited to move around the country this coming year and really start to tell that story and let that snowball into amazing size events as it gets closer and closer.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And then we got to get out of here, but before we do, tell everybody where they can find you, more information on Joby and all this.
Yeah, awesome. So Joby Aviation, Joby, aviation.com, or joby.aero. And we have some great social media. We have some great videos. We try to show very real, very organic things. We'll be at all kinds of events around the country, around the world. If you happen to be in Dubai next week, please stop by and say hello to me. I will also be all over the country trying to engage with folks. I think we are very, very excited. The last thing I'll say that is really a secret piece of knowledge for the broad public here. We fly almost every day these aircraft at Marina Airport in Marina, California. And if you're really excited and if you really want to see it, you can show up. You can go park your car at the airport and just stand right up in fence and watch it fly. Very few people end up doing that, but it's right at the public airport. We'd love to have you watch and say hi to some folks while you're there.
Wait, where is this going to be?
So Marina, California, Marina, California Airport. It's a public airport where we do our flight testing, and we have aircraft flying there almost every day.
Sweet. And you guys have an air show in Dubai coming up as well, don't you? I think I saw something somewhere about that.
Yeah. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week, we'll be flying at the Dubai Air Show. We'll be flying around there, and then more and more flights all over the country. We have several aircraft, the U.S., several aircraft that'll be flying around in the U.S. next year. We'll be flying several aircraft around the world, and then a whole bunch engaged in the final bits of flight testing for FAA. So lots and lots of aircraft in the skies is the game plan.
Yeah. Great. Well, look, appreciate you coming today. This is all very exciting to me. Maybe I'm a nerd too, I guess. I don't know. But either way, I enjoy it a lot. I think it's going to be big for the country. So thanks for doing it. Thanks for coming today. And let me know whenever you guys are going to be doing some of this stuff in Austin again, because I'll definitely be there.
Awesome. We'll have to get down there and fly with you. Thanks, Dan.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.